el Ayn Rand Center Latinoamérica. Voy a hacer una pequeña introducción en español y luego vamos a presentar al orador que va a darnos este segundo webinario en inglés. Bienvenidos a todos, muchas gracias por acompañarnos. Mi nombre es María Martí, soy presidente del Ayn Rand Center Latinoamérica. Y el objetivo del Ayn Rand Center es promover las ideas de Ayn Rand en la región, teniendo en cuenta que los latinoamericanos y la región en general necesitan un cambio de filosofía para lograr los cambios tanto políticos y económicos que queremos, y también un cambio de filosofía para poder vivir una mejor vida cada uno de nosotros. Los webinarios que estamos lanzando, ya tuvimos uno la semana pasada con Agustina Vergara Cid que nos habló sobre la ONU, van a ser siempre los martes a las 6 de la tarde, hora argentina, y lo hacemos aquí por Zoom. Estamos con algunos inconvenientes con Facebook Live, así que lo verán transmitido también en YouTube, en el canal de YouTube de la Ayn Rand Center, y después lo vamos a compartir también, por supuesto, en Facebook Live, en Facebook, perdón, en los canales de Facebook y en los social media de la Ayn Rand Center Latinoamérica. El miércoles que viene tenemos el siguiente webinario en español, vamos a introducirnos en temas más de psicología. Lo vamos a tener a Juan Ignacio Ardón, que es un psicólogo clínico y profesor de la Universidad Francisco Marroquín. Escribí Francisco Marroquín sin anteojos, esa fui yo, y lo escribí mal y me acabo de dar cuenta, pido disculpas, de Guatemala. Y el tema va a ser el remedio correcto de la ansiedad, salud mental frente a misticismo. Les recomiendo para seguir las actividades de la Ayn Rand Center, seguirnos en nuestra website aynrandlatam.org, en la fanpage Ayn Rand Center Latinoamérica. Tenemos un grupo también de debate sobre las ideas de Ayn Rand que se llama Ayn Rand Latinoamérica. En Instagram y en Twitter estamos en Ayn Rand Latam, y mensualmente enviamos un newsletter que se llama Rand Express, con novedades, con links a videos, con artículos traducidos, todo relacionado con el objetivismo, así que para aquellos que les interese, solo tienen que entrar a la página, al website aynrandlatam.org, y al final van a encontrar suscribirse al newsletter, con poner sus datos ahí. A partir del siguiente mes van a empezar a recibir el newsletter. También les recomendamos bajar, para aquellos que hablan en inglés, la Ayn Rand University, que es una aplicación para los teléfonos, con centenares de horas, no sé exactamente, por ahí Agustina puede ser más concreta en cuántas horas de cursos de objetivismo hay en esta aplicación. Realmente vale la pena para continuar con su educación filosófica. Les recomiendo también seguirnos en las redes, pues vamos a ir anunciando las conferencias que organicemos. Teníamos pensado organizar una en septiembre en Buenos Aires y en Brasil. Con toda esta situación todavía estamos viendo si la vamos a postergar o no, pero informaremos novedades, calculo que a fines de mayo, sobre qué es lo que vamos a hacer con esta situación. Recomiendo sobre todo leer los libros de Ayn Rand, no hay mejor herramienta que ir a la fuente, y los libros de Ayn Rand son una maravilla. Tenemos la suerte de tenerlos traducidos al español y al portugués, no todos ellos, pero la gran mayoría, y si no, y si entienden inglés, obviamente lo mejor es tratar de conseguirlos en inglés. Así que esta fue una introducción. Básicamente lo quiero presentar ahora a nuestro speaker del día, que es Aaron Smith. Aaron nos va a hablar sobre individualismo, genuino y falsificado. Aaron es fellow del Ayn Rand Institute, fue instructor mío en un programa que el Ayn Rand Institute ofrece que se llama Objectivist Academic Center. Lo tuvimos como instructor durante 3 años, es un programa que para aquellos que quieran saber más, no duden en contactarnos porque van a salir con una muy buena educación filosófica y sobre todo en objetivismo. Así que aquellos que después quieran saber un poco más sobre Aaron y sobre el tema en particular que va a tratar hoy, les recomiendo, él escribió un artículo muy bueno sobre justamente este tema, individualismo genuino y falsificado, que está tanto en inglés, en New Ideal, en la página del Ayn Rand Institute, como en español, traducido al español, en la página del Ayn Rand Center Latinoamérica. Así que les recomiendo, para ir más profundo sobre este tema, leer su artículo. Así que sin más, lo presento. Aaron, are you there? It's very nice to have you here with us.
Hi, Maria. Thank you.
So all for you.
Okay, great. So I'm going to go. First of all, thanks a lot, Maria, for introducing me and bringing me to your audience. So hello, everyone. I think this is the first webinar I've done specifically for the audience in Latin America. Obviously, the topic is not only for Latin Americans, but so I'm happy to connect with you guys. And we're going to keep this pretty informal. So I have some slides that I'll use, but I'm going to leave a lot of time for questions. So please, bring whatever questions you have and think about what it is that is coming across in the presentation, and whatever you want to ask me, you can ask in the end. So let me start a screen share here. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so the title of this webinar is Individualism, Genuine and Counterfeit. And what I want to do is talk about Ayn Rand's conception of what individualism is. The title of the talk derives, in some sense, from one of the articles in Ayn Rand's book, The Virtue of Selfishness. And it's called Counterfeit Individualism. And it deals with basically the subject that I'm going to be talking about today is what individualism really is, and separating that out from ways of conducting oneself or living one's life or orienting oneself toward other people that might look like individualism, that might be confused with it, but are fundamentally different from individualism. So that's a little bit about the title. So most of this is going to be about distinguishing what I think, what Ayn Rand thinks is genuine individualism from forms of behavior that are often confused with it, but are fundamentally different. So that's the topic, and I hope you'll find it interesting. So individualism. One of the reasons I wanted to raise this issue or discuss it is that if you're tuning into a webinar like this from the Ayn Rand Center, you're probably already in favor, in some sense, of individualism, and probably think of yourself in some sense as an individualist. And so what I'm going to have to say here will hopefully be relevant to thinking about what it means to be an individualist, because the theme, the issue, the philosophical issue of individualism versus collectivism is a major philosophic question, and it's a major issue in our world today. So I'll say briefly about what individualism and collectivism are in general, and what it means more personally. So individualism and collectivism are two different ways of thinking about the relationship between the individual and the group or the collective. Use the term collective, the group, the state, the nation, whatever the relevant group is. So it's about thinking about the relationship between the individual and the group. According to individualism, and this is more from a social political perspective, individualism is the view that in relationship to society, the individual is sovereign with a right to his own life, his own liberty, the pursuit of his own goals, and so on. And that society is a form in which individuals organize themselves in a way that they can each pursue their own goals and live their own lives. So individuals says every individual has a sort of sovereign control over their own lives, and they have a right to exist for their own sake. Whereas collectivism is the opposite view. Collectivism is the view that the group is sovereign. The group is fundamentally what matters, and that the individual's role is to serve the group, whether it's the group, the community, the society, the nation, and that the group, the goals of the group, as represented by their majority or their ruling figures or whichever it is, the group gets to decide what the individual can do, whether it disposes of the individual. So the role of the individual is to serve the group. The individual has no right to live for his own sake. It's service to the community, service to the collective, to the state. And the way in which this issue plays out is in large part a matter of the degree of individual personal freedom an individual has within a society. And it relates to the issue of individual rights to the extent that a society respects individual rights, takes them very seriously, and takes the role of society to protect individual rights. These are the more individualistic societies, versus the more collectivist societies, where there's much less role for personal or individual freedom or goal setting and choices. And much more of that is determined by the state or the society. That's imposed on them in one form or other. So that's more individualism and collectivism from a social political perspective. But what I want to talk about today is what individualism means for each of you, what it means more personally, more psychologically, more in the way in which you think about yourself in relation to other people. I think it's mainly about your basic orientation toward the world and toward other people, even outside of a political context. So how does this issue come up? And I think for most people, you first start to grapple with your relationship to other people. Typically, I think in school, I think because you're in an environment where there are many other people, typically your age or roughly your age. And there are certain pressures to conform, to not stand out, to not be different. And I think that many people are rather conventional, and they tend to do what everyone else does. And so you'll notice, I assume all of you have been to middle school and high school, at least here. And you'll know that there are certain kind of cliques or groups that tend to form, and maybe they dress the same, or they listen to the same music, or whichever. And you can notice conformity. In other words, it seems like an unthinking obedience or way of acting that you just do what everybody else does. And if you're and also there are pressures on you often. So if it's you have, let's say, tastes that are different than other people, your interests are different than other people, the books you like, the music you listen to, the clothes you like to wear. I mean, these are usually more superficial things, but you're young, a person is young at that time. And often you get certain kinds of ways in which people can try to pressure you or humiliate you or make fun of you or not let you like join in with them and so on if you're different and so on. So those are the various ways in which young people often confront this issue, and they have to think for themselves. They have to think, what do I do with that? Because one common response is simply to hide or suppress or in some way subordinate your own values, your own desires, your own interests, your own thinking to other people, and simply treat it as, if I want to fit in, I will act as if I don't like these things. I'll act as if I don't think these things. And so some people do that, not usually in every area of their life, but in certain areas where there is a certain kind of pressure, they kind of back off and suppress their own views. But I think to people who are more self-assertive, people who are more independent, will often look down on conformity. They don't want to be a part of that. They refuse to be a part of that kind of group. And they sort of bristle at the calls for conformity. And they seek a kind of another way of orienting themselves. But part of the problem is that particularly young people, but even, not young people, it's everybody today, often don't have a clear view of what individualism is and what it means to be an individualist. And so often what will happen is they'll start out on a path or a way of living their life or orienting themselves toward others, which I think is fundamentally opposed to individualism, but is often confused with it. And so what we're going to do, we'll talk a bit about several kinds of ways in which this manifests itself. Some of these are more, I think, young person's errors, but some of these, I think, continue throughout people's life. And they never really clearly sorted out. And I think Ayn Rand has a really important way of looking at individualism, which I know this has helped me out because I've fallen prey to at least one of these at some point during my life. And it's not weird that someone would fall into these kinds of pseudo individualism types or whatever. But let me talk about them. So that's what we're talking about right now, and that's why I think this is important. So let's go to what I would characterize as I think there's three wrong ways of approaching being an individual. And I think the first, which is probably the most the most common, I think, is what you might call the anti-conformist or the non-conformist. I think anti-conformist is better. And this is the kind of person who sees the conformity around him or her and rejects it. But the form in which the person rejects conformity is to go the opposite direction. It's to take the things that the people they regard as conformists, to take the things that they like, their tastes, their judgments, whatever it is, to look at those kinds of things and then do the opposite in a way of trying to show that you're different from these people. You're trying to mark yourself off as different in some ways. And often this is, again, when you're growing up, often this is a matter of, so you choose a style of dress that is outside the mainstream, that looks like, you're really different just from your dress. Looking down on what other people value and just trying to mark yourself off as different in as much of a way as you can. And I think this is one of the easiest to spot because they're deliberately trying to look different. But the problem I see with this is that what the person is really doing is looking at what other people do, what they think, what they value, what they want, what they wear, and then trying to do the opposite of that, not because the person they have their own views about, this is what I think is true, this is what I think is important, these are my own judgments that I've arrived at by myself. It's not so much that, it's more that I'm going to do the opposite of what they do. So there's a way in which this isn't really a show of independence or a manifestation of independence. It's really a manifestation of dependence. Because fundamentally, you're not making your choices on the basis of the conclusions that you've arrived at separately or independently. You're making your decisions on the basis of what other people do, and then you just do the opposite. So I think there's a way in which that's a fundamentally dependent way of functioning. But I think that's more, I think, of a younger person's error. Partly because you don't know what it means to often to think for yourself. But so let's move on to another one. I call that the anti-conformist. Let's move on to another type, which I accidentally gave you a glimpse of earlier. I think this is a good image. This person I think of as the subjectivist. And what marks off the subjectivist is I'll do whatever I want because it's what I want. In other words, I'll follow whatever whims or desires or or whatever I want to do because it's what I want to do. And they see they see that as a form of independence. They see that a form of being an individualist is other people say I should do this, this, and this. I don't want to adhere to any of that. So I'll do whatever I feel like doing. And often this type of person will reject any kind of rules or principles or anything coming in from the outside. And in part, I think because they see the rules or principles that they're being asked to, let's say, obey or take seriously as just someone else's say-so, just someone else's imposition, their arbitrary imposition on you. And you don't want that, right? So you push that off. I'm not going to do that. But then you see what your own approach to life being, well, it's either I'm supposed to just obey what other people arbitrarily tell me to do, or I'll just do whatever I feel like doing. And that way of drawing the line, I think what the person really lacks is a sense of objectivity. So it's not really that an individualist in my perspective, and I think Ayn Rand's perspective, is not the person who simply follows their feelings or follows their desires because they happen to have those desires or they happen to have those feelings. An individualist follows them because they think they're true. And what marks off a subjectivist, now I have this little image of this woman with an anarchy t-shirt and looking like a rebel type, for those of you who can't see the audio, or maybe only see this on audio. One doesn't have to look like that, of course, to be a subjectivist. You can wear a suit. But the hallmark of the subjectivist is they think they don't have a view of when you're formulating what your values are and what you want out of life and how you're going to behave, that there are ways in which you can do that objectively in terms of looking at the facts, following a logical method, reaching actual truth about the world. And because if a person approached life more like that, you would see that there are various rules that you ought to follow because you can understand that they're true or that they're right or that they're valuable for you. And they're not just some sort of arbitrary imposition from the outside. Like, I'll go my own way, don't tell me anything. There are all sorts of rules that I think an individualist should and properly should follow if they understand that they're valuable or they're true or they understand the rationale involved. So it's not about people just telling you what to do versus you do whatever the hell you want. It's more about thinking about what's right and true and being guided by your judgment in that regard. So I think the subjectivist is on the wrong track in that way too. And I think principally because what they're doing is they're not following reason. They're following their feelings or desires only. We can talk more about that. When it comes to, I'll bring up a third type. There are many forms in which one could try to be an individual in some respect, and I think go wrong. But here's another one. And this one I call the loner. And it's a type that sees association with other people, learning from other people, being on a team with other people, and so on. It's various kinds of associations with other people as a threat to their individualism, as they're a threat to their individuality. And so that if you join a team or you play group sports, or you learn from other people, that's in some way making you dependent. Here are some other forms. Some people don't want to accept help from other people or assistance because they think that makes them a dependent. And I think some of this is a bit better motivated in the sense that this kind of person doesn't want to be, they want to be independent. They don't want to be a dependent, and they want to protect their independence from what they regard as other people's influence. But I think there's something wrong with this kind of thing as well. An individualist, in Rand's sense, is not the person who disassociates himself from other people or tries to separate himself from other people. out of fear of their influence, really. It's what an independent person seeks is rational association, not disassociation, but rational association. In other words, if you join a sport, it's a team sport, your basketball or whichever. It's because you enjoy the sport, you see it as a value, you enjoy the interactions and stuff, and it's this, you know to yourself that this is something that's genuinely and genuinely valuable to you. Likewise, I mean, when you work on a collaborative project with a team, I mean, there are all sorts of things that are problematic about that sometimes, but in general, it's like when you work with somebody on a collaborative project as a team, you're trying to achieve some goal that you can't achieve on your own, and you work together with other people. You associate with them, you learn from them. But the idea is you see the goal is worthwhile, and you understand for yourself that the goal is worthwhile, and it's an association which you choose independently for your own reasons to get into, and you can step out if it's not of value to you, or if you don't think what they're doing is right anymore or whatever, you can step out. But the idea is not disassociation from other people to prove your individuality or to protect it, but it's to rationally associate with people on your own terms, according to your own rationally chosen values and according to your own judgment. So I don't think what individualism involves is separating yourself out. And here I think what individualism and individuality and what it means to be an individualist, I think it's heavily focused on thinking. It's on asking yourselves a lot of questions about what it is that you think is true. What do you think is worthwhile in life? Like, what is valuable? What kinds of things should you go after or try to secure or protect? And forming your own first-handed views about this. There are a lot of views out there, and there are a lot of different people with their own ideas and conceptions of this, competing conceptions of what's true or what's good. But it's you individually. I mean, there is no collective mind that tells you what to do. You have your own mind, and you have to think out independently, what do I think is true? Because in the end, the only knowledge and understanding that you actually have is the kind of knowledge which you can validate, that you can show in reason to be true. And that's what knowledge is. It's some grasp of a fact of reality and that you know is true. And so so individualism from Ayn Rand's perspective is fundamentally about the use of your mind. Are you going to try to form your values and your judgments firsthand by your own firsthand thinking? And that includes learning from other people, but you think firsthand. When you learn from other people, you have to think, well, what are they saying? How much do they know? How much do I understand what they're saying? And all of this is an individual process. So it's how much are you thinking firsthand, reaching your values and judgments firsthand. That's fundamentally, it's that kind of intellectual independence that I think is at the root of what it means to be an individualist. So it's not a matter of looking different. It's not a matter of standing out in a crowd. It's not a matter of marking yourself off as, oh, I'm not one of them. It's not a matter of separating yourself away from association with other people to protect your independence. I think all of these things are mistaken manifestations of what it really is. It's thinking about what you want to achieve in life and independently and standing by that. So it's because I made the point about pressures to conform and so on. So let me go back. So if you are an individualist and if you're forming your views and your values firsthand by your own rational thinking, then what you're going to find is sometimes you will be different. Sometimes you will stand out in other ways. But the aim isn't to stand out or to be different. That's just an outcome that may or may not happen. You may decide that some of the things that are conventionally enjoyed or believed are things that you believe as well. So the issue isn't whether they're conventional. The issue is whether they're true. Their issue isn't how many other people think like this or dress like this or behave like this. The idea is, but what's the right way to behave in my own judgment? What do I think? So there is an issue of standing up for your own values and your own judgments in the face of pressure. to abandon those or to suppress them. So there is an element of standing up for yourself. But I think if you build your own psyche, build your own mental equipment like that, if the way you're building yourself, I'll put it that way, is by doing your own first-handed thinking, reaching your judgments and standing by them. I think that's really what individualism is about. And I think in the end, what it gives you is a kind of a serenity, a kind of self-confidence, a kind of, self-possession that I think also strengthens your ability to stand up for yourself and to not want to conform, not want to simply obey because somebody said so. And so I think the person who's more operating independently on it from an intellectual perspective, operating independently in how you choose your judgments and your values, you'll be the type of person who wants an individualist society, not a collectivist one where you're simply told what to do and you're supposed to obey. No, you've got your own thoughts about what is true and what is good and what is worthwhile and worth living for. And when you have those worked out for yourself, or you're on the track to forming those views, you don't want to be told what to do. You don't want to conform just because other people expect you to. You want to follow your own judgments in terms of what you think is right. And so I think there's a more psychological roots to having a desire for an individualistic society. And I think the roots of it are independent thinking, that kind of intellectual independence. And I think the best place to look if you want to explore these kinds of issues in some detail is not really a philosophical treatise or something, but it's Ayn Rand's novel, The Fountainhead. The whole story is, the theme is, as Ayn Rand put it, individualism versus collectivism, not in politics, but in men's souls. And by soul, she doesn't mean anything religious or mystical. She means in yourself, your mind, your character. And so it tracks different characters, and you watch the way they live their lives. And the main character, the hero, Howard Rourke, he's an architect, is very, very much very independent-minded, and a friend of his is much less so. And there are other characters in the book, and they're all different aspects of this issue. Is to what extent are they making other people the main focus of their lives versus their own judgment and their own thinking? And I think it's a great novel with a great plot. But if you're interested in exploring this in some detail, I think that novel is really the place to do it. Maria already mentioned this point, so I'll go ahead and say this: that if you want to explore Ayn Rand's work in more detail, there's a ton of free content available through the Ayn Rand University app. You can download it on Android or Apple or whichever. It unlocks a whole lot of material for you to discuss if you want to learn more. So that's all I have for prepared remarks. I can go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and we're going to start some questions, a question period, and I think it's going to be moderated. So let me just stop sharing my screen and say thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. It was a very clarifying and inspiring talk to let us know what's the big difference between a genuine individualism and a counterfeit one. So since I'm here, I would like to ask the first question, and after me, I will leave Agustin. I want to tell the people, if do you have a Q&A there, you can do your questions there. If you don't feel comfortable doing your questions in English, you can do it in Spanish, and Agustina will help you to translate the question for Aaron. So the question that I have is, how would you relate individualism, genuine individualism, with self-esteem? Or on the other hand, can you relate counterfeit individualism with lack of self-esteem or the not completely developed self-esteem?
Yeah.
Be my question.
Yeah, it's a good question. There's, I think, is a deep connection between intellectual independence that I've been describing, which I take to be the core of true individualism. It's intellectual independence. And you need intellectual independence if you're going to have self-esteem. I think it's a necessity, because what intellectual independence does is you're thinking for yourself, you're looking at the world, you're reaching your own discoveries about it. And also, you can make mistakes too, but you think about, no, that was a mistake, and where did that go wrong? And how do I correct that? And you're always on the premise that you're using your mind to reach knowledge. And the more you do that for yourself, the more you have a sense that you're capable of reaching knowledge. And the more in the sense that you form your own values and you know why you love what you love, you know why you want what you want, and you have good reasons for them. The more you start to develop a self, real personal values, real personal convictions. They aren't just picked up or accepted because other people believe them, but you know that they're true. And I think you start to feel a greater sense of efficacy, like ability, like I can know the world. I can navigate the world. I'm capable of doing it. And I think that's part of what comes into self-confidence and self-esteem. And if you don't do that, like on the other side, you kind of have a little self-doubt about your own ability to reach knowledge. And so you rely on other people. I guess other people know, I mean, a lot of the way this comes up in a young person's life is they start questioning the issue of God, because that whole issue is everywhere, right? So this is not like a niche philosophical thing. It's everywhere in the culture. And when you start doubting that, this was the case for me. I started doubting the existence of God when I was, 11. I'd never heard of anybody who didn't believe in God. So the question then just becomes, everybody else thinks it's true. And the person can say, well, I guess they know better than me. And you stop your own individual thinking about it. I didn't, but many people do, and on different kinds of issues. Some issues they feel more confident, some issues they feel less confident. On moral issues, people often feel a lot less confident to think for themselves. They think, well, I guess everybody knows what's moral, and I'm supposed to just agree. And but yeah, I think for self-esteem, you need a sense. You need to evaluate yourself as capable of knowing the world, capable of understanding things, capable of doing the kind of thinking that helps you reach your values. And if you don't have that, and the more you're dependent on other people, the less sense of efficacy you have, for yourself, less confidence too.
Thank you, Aaron. So I want to introduce Agustina. Many of you know her, and she's going to be the moderator for the rest of the questions. Thank you, Agustina, for being here. So,
gracias, Maria. Hi, Aaron.
Hey.
Good to have you. Okay, so we have a question here in the Q&A module. Could you give an example of characters in Rand's book which represent the 3 types of individualism gone wrong that you mentioned: the anti-conformist, the subjectivist, and the loner?
I don't know about the loner. Where I get the loner is, I think, from some fans of Ayn Rand, usually younger people, who see a character like Howard Rourke, for example. And Howard Rourke is a very special character as a character in a novel. I mean, he's very carefully drawn. And I think he's the character, I think, in all of Rand's novels that seems the most separated from other people, the least concerned with other people. Other people almost don't seem to have a reality to him. And so he's that starkly drawn. And I think people who are inspired by Rourke, as I was, can often think that it means separating yourself. It means having that kind of attitude. And I think that's a mistake in a way to understand Howard Rourke, but I think it's not surprising that people would have that view. So I see this among young fans of objectivism. And they won't accept a scholarship because they think it makes them dependent and things like that. And I think that's a real mistake. But when it comes to the nonconformist, there's a passage in The Fountainhead where Ayn Rand kind of parodies or makes fun of. There's a literary circle, a circle of artists and writers and so on that have been gathered together by one of the villains, in effect. And like there's a woman who writes novels, but she only writes in lowercase letters, or she doesn't, and there's another writer who doesn't use commas or periods, like silly things like that, which they think they're edgy. They think they're edgy, cool, they're individualists and stuff. And it's really just a matter of looking at what other people do and say, well, I don't do that. And they're really letting other people's activities and the way of dealing with things dictate the way they don't really have any independent conception of what art is or how they should conduct art. When it comes to what did I say, the kind of rebel type, the subjectivist, so these are overlapping types. So it's not that you're a subjectivist, but not this, or I mean, these are terms that came up, but subjectivism is any kind of view where you think that there is no issue of what the facts are, what's right and what's true. It's you have some view and that's your view, and I have my view and that's my view. There is no truth. It's just what I feel like and what I feel like I want, and what you feel like and what you feel like you want. And somebody who approaches the world like that, that's subjectivism. It's the subject, me, my desires, that determine what's right for me. And that's all over the place when it comes to nonconformists and other types. Yeah, so I don't know if I would have on my mind to single out one particular character, because that's kind of all over.
Where would you place Dominique? Would you place her in any of these categories? Dominique, the character from the Fountainhead.
Yeah, so Dominique is, I have to think about that, but so just take this as totally off the cuff. A number of things are going on with Dominique. Dominique has made some mistaken judgments about, in the story, Rand presents her as having made some mistaken judgments about how would I put it? The efficacy of evil, and it's their view that the good can't win in the world. And it's a conclusion she's mistakenly drawn. And so she's passionately idealistic about the good. And she's in love with Howard Rourke precisely for that reason. He's the highest, she can imagine. And she's in love with that. But she thinks he can't win in the world, that other people's evil, other people's dishonesty, irrationality will always win. And that in some sense he'll lose, he'll be crushed, destroyed in some way, undermined, and so that the good can't win in the world. So that's a mistake that she's made. And it's, I think, an understandable one to feel that. But her error isn't so much, her error is to give too much prominence to other people's actions. Whereas she should be thinking more about what it is that I want out of the world. What do I think about Rourke, and what should be my actions in response to Rourke? And I think she's trying to be first-handed, but she's crippled by that worldview that it can't win, and why seek to go after an ideal that in the end it'll just going to get crushed. So she's making, I think, an error of knowledge rather than being second-handed. But she has her own sort of aberration way of dealing with other people. I mean, she associates with people she despises on a regular basis as a way of her showing her contempt for it. And so she's an interesting character. But
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have another question here. You were talking about the fact that of cooperation, and how being an individualist doesn't mean just rejecting, like working with others or learning from others and whatnot. But here, Jose is asking, what is the meaning of cooperation? Like, if you could define what it would mean, like, if you want to say that with like rational cooperation, as opposed to altruistic cooperation.
Yeah, cooperation is a voluntary agreement to participate with others to achieve some goal. That's what cooperation is. So if you work with a contractor to help build a house, and that's cooperation. I mean, you're not putting them into slavery. You're paying them. You're working together with them. They're working with you to achieve a joint goal, some goal that both of you want to achieve and that you can't do alone, or that you find more enjoyable or more valuable to do together with other people. But the aspect in which it's individualistic is if you yourself think the goal is valuable and worthwhile, and you think that the participation with other people is going to help you achieve that goal. But you can go your own way. If it turns out that the people are not as competent as you thought they were, or they're not as good as you thought they were, you can simply step out and not cooperate with them. I don't think you should cooperate with everybody. It depends on the people. It depends on the goals you're after. It depends on the terms. And again, if you no longer agree with the terms, you can always go your own way. So it's being first-handed in terms of the goals you're after and in terms of the people you want to associate with. But it's on a voluntary basis. I mean, so that's not collectivism where you're all roped into supporting causes that you don't agree with and obedience.
Yeah, that ties into another question that we have from Ricardo that says, in a work environment, sometimes, your boss or your manager asks you to do something that you don't think is the right thing to do or the best way to solve a problem. But yet what the person does, like the employee does, is, quote, as he says, to compromise as a way to keep his or her job. So Ricardo's asking if you could comment on how one could go about thinking about these type of conflicts that arise.
Yeah, sure. Because anybody who works for an organization, as opposed to maybe works for yourself, you have to, and it's particularly one with hierarchies, like where you got a boss and your boss has a boss and so on. You have to manage and deal with these kinds of things. Part of the context for thinking about how to address those is that if you've chosen to work for an organization that has some kind of hierarchical structure like this, like you have a boss and your boss has a boss and your boss has a committee that he reports to or whatever it is, that you're playing a role in the organization. So it's not that if you have an organization of 50 people, that they're all complete free agents, so to speak, everybody does what they independently think is the right way. You can't run a business like that. So there is a sense in which there are legitimate reasons why. Suppose somebody comes up with a marketing plan for a product that you have, and well, I mean, I develop content, right? I'm a writer. I give courses, I give classes, I write articles, I give talks, and so on. So I'm on a content end. If I'm in a meeting and people are saying, "Hey, how do we market this?" And I don't agree, let's say, for example, with the way in which this is being pitched, I could speak up and I can say, I can offer something of value for the conversation. But it could just be that ultimately, you get overridden, and this can be anywhere in any company. But part of it is you're not on the marketing team. In some kinds, it's just, well, I mean, there's a reason for a division of tasks. And there are various ways in which you can try to promote or support the ideas or approaches that you think are better. But you have to realize too that there's a reason why you have a job description. So your role is actually delimited within an organization. And sometimes you just need to back off. And I don't think that's so much an issue of compromise. It's understanding that you play a role in an organization and they're paying you to do that role. And they also have judgment too. So their view might be, no, I don't agree with you. And so it's all these people exercising their own judgment, ideally, independently thinking and so on. But in the end, sometimes you just have a role to play, and that's why you're hired. And if it gets too frustrating, you find that you're really having to compromise all the time. You feel like, I'm not happy with the product. I'm not happy with what they're doing. Sometimes you might just need to go your own way and do something else or work for a different organization. But if you mean compromise your integrity, do something you think is immoral, that's on another level as opposed to a marketing plan, which you think you have a better idea and they don't agree with it. That's different. So I think in terms of the things that are compromises on little issues, well, where it's just these are adjustments that you have to accept sometimes. You do what you can, and then you make sure you understand that you're playing a role in the organization that you've agreed to, and you have a job description, and that's the way it is. Because you have to respect the fact that other people have judgments too about these things. But on moral issues, it's different. I mean, if you have they're asking you to compromise your integrity, that's a whole different issue.
Yes, I was going to bring up that next. The issue of compromise, and I think that's a little bit what I think the question was going when it involves like a moral issue. So I was wondering if you could briefly say, what's the difference between, say, compromising in a sense like you're giving up a principle, you're going against something that you really value, you're going against your own integrity, and compromising within a principle.
Yeah, well, if we agree on certain kinds of principles and we make a mutual adjustment to claims, I mean, it's just like if you and I are going to go see a movie and you want to see one thing and I want to go see, I don't know, The Mandalorian. Well, of course, we'd both want to see that. But that's the kind of thing where we agree that we voluntarily come up with an idea of something to do. It's not one person forces the other person. You agree on the basic principles, as one associates voluntarily, and we each respect each other's views or preferences, because we're friends or something. And that's the basic framework. Then yeah, okay, so okay, fine, we'll go see that today, and maybe next time we'll see what I wanted to see. I don't think of these really as compromises. But if somebody wants you to go against your own, to go against your integrity, it's like then what's the principle that you share? You have to share principles. And that's the basic framework that you're operating in. It's another thing to grab somebody and throw them in the back of a truck to take them to a movie. You have to. There you don't even agree on the basic principles of association.
Yeah, that makes sense, Aaron. Thank
and
you.
There's an article that wasn't very articulate, but there's an article, a really good, very short article, in The Virtue of Selfishness, called. What's it called, Agustina?
Does life require compromise?
Yeah, so two of them. Does life require compromise? That's one of them. And there's another one called The Conflicts of Men's Interests. And both of those deal with the issue of compromise. And I think both are really important articles. They're both very short and very, I think, dense and rich. So definitely take a look at that if you want more.
I agree. There's another interesting question here. Is it possible to be an evil individualist, or will individualism always eventually lead to good ethics?
It's a good question. It depends on what you mean by individualism, because there is a certain conception of what it means to be an individualist. Is you go get whatever you want for yourself. If it includes trampling other people to get what you want, then you do it. That's what it means. Otherwise, you're just a sucker. You're just a pawn in the game. You're going to screw over other people before they get you. And if that's your conception of individualism, yeah, you could think of as the evil individualist and stuff. But what Ayn Rand's pushing you to think of is, don't think of that as individualism. That's a form of counterfeit individualism, she would say. Because what fundamentally makes you an individual is, I think, the use of your mind. Because this is how you identify what's valuable to you. This is how you identify what you think is true. It's how you form your own personal values and convictions that really make up the person who you are as a unique individual. Otherwise, you just allow whatever random ideas or random feelings that happen to come up, that winds up constituting your your person. And then you just wind up being just a random bundle of whims. And I would say, well, the person doesn't really have a self in that regard, in the sense of real convictions, in terms of real values. It's stuff that comes out. And there's no solidity to it. Yeah, so that depends how you want to cash out individualism.
Okay, I want to turn now to this question. I'm gonna rephrase it a little bit, but basically what Marcela is asking here is, sometimes it's not easy to be a true, individualist, because it requires to, going against a lot of, things that are that people hold, that conventionally hold as true or as good, such as, the ethics, the morality of altruism, for example. So it's not easy to, become an individualist and to live your life like that, because many people will look at you and say, and think you're immoral or think you're doing things wrong and whatnot. So what she's asking is, she's saying it's very difficult to do this. And how do we actually practice it every day? How do we endure this, this harsh criticism that we may face when, practicing individualism and practicing Rand's morality?
So that is an excellent question. And that could be, we could talk for a long time on that, because I think it's a really important question. And I'm very sympathetic to the questioner. I don't know what to tell you. in one respect, it's, but how do you live with yourself if you don't stand up for what you think is true and what you think is right? Don't you want self-esteem? And that requires courage. And that's the thing that you were saying, this is hard to do. I mean, everybody looks down on me. They think I'm bad or whatever it is. Or if you take, I mean, Latin America, right? Catholicism is everywhere. Religion's everywhere. Altruism is everywhere. Collectivism is everywhere. And if you're someone who's more oriented toward reason, toward individualism and stuff, yeah, I mean, you're going to get a lot of negativity. But my view is, so what? I mean, you have to, I don't know how else to say it. You have to live by what you think is, I mean, if you're not talking, you're up against a firing squad. I mean, you know, sticks and stones, right? I mean, the story I tell sometimes, because I think it's a good illustration of this. When I was about 15, I was really into this band that I like. I grew up in this small town, and they're very conventional. I didn't like it, but I was into this band, and they had these amazing outfits. They looked awesome. So at some point I got a job, and I got myself some kind of clothes that looked like this. I probably looked kind of crazy. I don't know, but I thought it was amazing. I thought it was awesome. I thought I looked super cool. And so I show up the first day of school. This was I was about 15, first day of school, 15 or 16, I think 15. And everybody just laughed. Everybody was walking down that hallway. Everybody's laughing at me, shouting names and stuff like this. And I remember going into the gymnasium to just to sit by myself for a while. And because I didn't expect that. It never occurred to me that people would respond that way. Mm-hmm. And I sat there thinking about it for a while. And then at some point it was just like, they can all go to hell. I mean, really, I like this. I think this is good. And this is something I want. And I'm not going to let them tell me how to dress, how to behave, and let their views govern what I think or what I do. I was like, that you can't do that. And I was like, okay, that's it. And then I didn't worry about it. I walked out of there, and they continued to laugh and stuff, but I just shrugged it off. I really got myself into the mindset, like, what's important is not what other people think and what other people say. What's important is what you think is true and what is good. And there's a real confidence and self-esteem that comes about from approaching life that way and about building your character that way. And what I found out many years later, just because you connect with people on Facebook, you know, like years later, is I think there were some people who really respected that. They didn't say anything, of course, but they really respected that and thought, yeah, okay, yeah, that was pretty cool, you know. And I think the more you do that, the more you set an example for yourself, and the more you give other people courage to do the same as well, to also stand up for themselves, because they can see an example of it. It's like, well, he didn't back down from all that pressure. And somebody could say, yeah, no, that's the way to go, you know. And it's like, maybe I should be more like that, you know. So in terms of specific advice, I don't know, but I think that the value is, you know, self-esteem and self-confidence. Yeah. So I don't know what particular things you're facing, the question is facing, but that's all I have to say. And I hope that's helpful. And sorry, that's a personal example. I was trying not to use those too much.
No, I think it's good that you bring, you know, these like examples of things that actually happen. And also, I just wanted to clarify, I think from what you said before, the fact that someone thinks or tells you that you're wrong or on something, it doesn't mean necessarily, I mean, just because someone else said it doesn't mean it's necessarily wrong. What it means is you have to judge for yourself, right? Because maybe I'll, you know, go out dressed like a clown and they're right, like, or go dressed inappropriately somewhere, and it's just not appropriate to be dressed like that in a certain, you know, environment. And someone could tell me, hey, you know, like, that's not cool. And just because they said it doesn't mean that it's that they're wrong. But
yeah,
it's
and people
the independent judgment part that it's important.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying that was the case with you, but
you're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because sweatpants.
What's that?
Sweatpants are out.
I don't like red, whatever. Okay. All right. So we have a question from Jose. He says, he's asking, and I'm going to rephrase it a little bit too. So when you see someone that is practicing or really trying, like genuinely trying to practice individualism, but that person is trying hard, but it's not being entirely rational, and it's he's just kind of being manipulated. I'm not sure what he means by that, but he's trying. So how do you come up to that person and tell them, hey, look, I think you're doing this the wrong way, or I think you should rethink this thing or this premise that you're holding right now, without, seeming arrogant? That's the way he's asking.
Depends on who the person is and what your relationship to them is. I mean, if they're a friend that you can talk to openly, it's a lot easier. I mean, still, maybe you need to be a little tactful. But if it's a friend that you can speak to openly, and you care about them, I think that shouldn't be too difficult. And it depends on what they're doing. But if it's just somebody that you don't know well, or something that you might not really have any business going up and telling them how they should function or how they should live their life differently, it's kind of none of your business, so to speak. But for the people who matter to you, you have to be able to, a couple things. You have to be able to know that what they're doing really is off track, that there is, in fact, something off about what they're doing. And to know what an appropriate way of doing it really is and why, so that you come across as not just critical, but offering something better, offering to help clarify something for them. And often you can start by asking them the questions. I noticed that, the last time we had that meeting at the club, you said such and such, or you did such and such, and that surprised me. What was going on there? Why did you do that? And you kind of try to get into their thinking a little bit and see what's motivating some of their actions, what's behind some of their actions in terms of their own thinking. And partly it's investigate a little bit just to talk to them about what's going on, and because you might find that you're wrong, and it actually that you misread the situation. In some cases, pretty well this is all wrong, what they're doing, and you want to know a bit more what's driving it. And I think that's more. It's not like you do this, don't do that, do something else. It's more like what's going on underneath that, and I think that helps you get to some of their values or some of their ideas, and it's often those that need to be changed or to be at least questioned, and you can talk about those kinds of things without being like you're the know-it-all who's going to tell them how to live. Often when you have a view like this is definitely right, that's definitely wrong, often some people's approach is just to go around telling people how they should live. And of course, you come off as a jerk. But it's more, if you take a real interest in the person, I think you'd want to know what's driving it, what's behind it, and helping them sort out what's right and what's wrong and what's true. And without just assuming that you sort of have all the answers or something.
Yeah, and also I think that if the person that you're trying to help is a rational person, they will welcome that feedback. Talking through and trying to see how they can improve, and they of course will take it or not take it, but they're going to judge your advice and its merits and decide for themselves. But someone rational would, I think, at least listen to the feedback if you're someone that they respect, at least.
Yeah, and take seriously two things when you're in that context. One, it's hard to get criticism. I don't care how rational you are, it can be hard to get criticism. You're told you're doing it the wrong way, and that can be hard to take. And second, keep in mind that they might not agree with you, and that you have to respect that they're sorting through these issues too. I mean, to the extent that they're rational, they're trying to sort through these issues too, and you have to let them sort through them. You can offer some leads to other ways of thinking about it, but you can't expect that they're simply just going to do it differently because you have the right idea. So that's all I have on that.
Yeah, so we're 5 minutes over time. Would you be okay staying 5 more minutes?
Sure.
We have a few more questions here.
No problem.
So I think that last question ties into the next question by Ricardo that says, do you have any comments on how to foster individualism when raising children?
I don't have children, so I don't have unique insights on children from a parenting perspective. I've worked with children, like school-age kids and little kids for a long time in a different context. They need to be able to experience their own efficacy their own ability to achieve things, to accomplish things on their own, in part to develop the sense that I can do it on my own, and to experience the joys and the rewards. I mean, when kids can do it, I can do it myself. They're like, leave me alone. You know, they like to be able to accomplish things by themselves. I mean, at a certain kind of age where they're capable. And they're really proud of these little achievements and stuff. They get really excited and proud about things that they do. Yeah. And the more that they can experience their own efficacy, are they doing something on their own individually and experiencing the joys and rewards of that, of the accomplishment, I think that's a really good thing. And that's one of the reasons why people put the kids in sports sometimes. I'm not saying do sports, but that's one arena where kids can experience their own abilities. And another one is, again, age appropriate, right? Not from a 1-year-old, but in general with your kids, you should give them reasons for what you do, and you should expect reasons from them, so that the way in which they think of themselves as conducting themselves is, no, I have to think about these things, and I have to have reasons, and I should think about what the other person's doing. So it's not a matter of obedience. It's a matter of thinking through the issue and coming to an understanding about, oh, I guess I can see the reason why. And also, don't get drawn into conventional ways of thinking about the issues of altruism and sacrifice. They should think of their own endeavors and pursuits as valuable, and not to teach them to suppress those if other people think differently, or if other people look down on that. Let them be more assertive in that regard. But again, children, there's a lot to say because they have different ages and different levels of knowledge. And
yeah, and I assume, I don't have children either, but I assume there's a balance between letting your kid express their individuality and certain ways in which they express it that are not optimal or appropriate even sometimes.
Yeah, and I want to add something to that, is that let them have their own ideas and their own dreams and their own way of doing things. Leave them alone to some extent. They're getting in a nose ring or whatever. As a parent, you think, oh God, it's like, to some extent, at a certain age, it's like, not when they're 2, right? But at a certain age, it's like, let them kind of go their own way a bit. And it's part of growing up. It's part of choosing the things that they think are interesting or worthwhile. And you have to manage that, because some things they do, it's dangerous and so on. But some of the things, it's like, you think they dress like an idiot, it's like, but they like it and they think it's important. Just leave them alone a bit, let them sort these things out. A lot of these things, they grow out of them. And, or if they, like, for example, here's just an example from my own upbringing. I mean, I wanted to be a rock star when I was a kid. I wanted to be Simon Le Bon from Duran Duran. I wanted to be like, my parents never dissuaded that. They never told me that was silly, or no one ever makes it in the music world. They didn't tell me that. They just let me run with that for a while, and I had that. And eventually I realized, for me personally, it doesn't really make any sense, and my thoughts went other ways. But their view was always, if you really try and you really put your mind to it, and you really put your effort into it, you can do what you want. I mean, you can achieve what you want. You're capable, but you really have to work for it, and you have to do it. But there was never a sense of there's barriers, or no, I don't think that's for you, or nobody ever makes it, so don't ignore that dream, or I don't think that's a good idea. You have to have some reality check, but don't impose too much of that yet on them, so that they get a sense that there are all these borders that they can't cross. And it's like, they don't yet have a conception yet that would allow them to process that. So in effect, what it does is it shrinks their horizons. It shrinks what they can think of as possible, and they need to face life with the feeling that lots of things are possible to me. And I think growing up with that perspective, I know for me it was really helpful, and I can imagine it would be helpful for other kids. So that's, again, like, I'm not a parent, but I guess that's what I would say.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Bueno, hay muchas preguntas, así que vamos a tener que saltear algunas, pero vamos a hacer la última hora. Aaron, last question. We're at time at 10 minutes past. So Maria, not Maria Marti, another Maria, is asking. She thanks you for your insightful talk, and she's asking if we can be genuine individualists stand by your judgments, and also believe in what she calls, spiritual transcendence, which I mean some sort of, religion or mysticism. Are those things compatible, to be a real individualistic, but, be religious or believing in a sort of mystical realm?
Well, again, so individualism has to do with arriving at your own judgments. But I think when it comes to arriving at your own judgments, it means you're arriving at them by reason. Because if you don't arrive at your own judgments by reason, all you're doing is accepting on faith from other people. Or you have this feeling like there's something out there. That's not a judgment. So are you really reaching these things by your own? Is it reason and logic and observation? In other words, your tool of knowledge. Are you using your actual tool of knowledge to reach the conclusion? And you can say, these are the reasons I think this is actually true and justified, like rationally justified. Then you're in the position of you reaching conclusions. This is what you're doing. Is that really what you're doing? And that you have to answer yourself, because I don't know you. Or is it really like, this is something I want to believe? It's personally important to me, but I couldn't really say it was a conclusion that I reached that I could demonstrate or provide. This is the evidence and this is my conclusion. And I think that there are some people, I think vastly it's in the minority, who think that they've reached a conclusion, like there's a God or something. And they really think that what they're doing is they're using reason, and and if they saw that those reasons didn't work, they would abandon the idea. So I think there are some people who think that they reach the notion of God by reason and logic. But I think for the vast majority of people, I think that the reason and logic doesn't matter to them in the end. So if you gave me like your 5 arguments for the existence of God, and I showed why all of them don't work, are you the kind of person that would then go, damn, I guess I should abandon the idea? I thought I had it right, but I guess I don't. Or the kind of person that would just say, well, okay, but I'll still believe. And then that's where you have to sort out, are you believing in something on reason, or are you believing in something on faith or feeling? Like are these real convictions in the sense that they're rational, independently thought out, or are they just things you personally want to believe in a way that's very subjective? So that was a little long-winded, sorry, but that's...
No, I agree. And I think that was a great answer to that question. It's a very complex question too. So there's also the issue of, it's not an easy thing, like we were saying before, but especially I think in that subject of religion is not, the easiest thing to abandon that idea.
Yeah, because it's not an easy
journey.
It's not like are there 10 cars in the parking lot or 9, and somebody proves that there's only 10 and you thought there were 9, or what? It's like, what? It's no big deal, right? Who cares, right? It's a simple error. But a lot of this is who I associate with. It's my sense of community with other people. It has to do with my hopes for the after death, and it's tied into a lot of emotional context that just that's kind of a network in a way that belief is tied into it. And then when that happens, it's very hard to you can't just cut it out.
Exactly.
Like you're cutting hair. It's like pulling out your bones or something, so
yeah. Maria, you're back.
I'm back. Well, first of all, thank you, Agustina and Nixon, who is the backstage helping us with the technological stuff. So thank you very much for your participation. And Aaron, was a real pleasure. I enjoyed a lot your talk and your answers too. So I really hope to have you soon with another topic, always from an objectivist perspective. But what we're trying to do with these webinars is bring in some abstract topics, at the same time some other topics that more practical topics that we can apply philosophy. So I think this one was one of this kind, where we can apply abstract principles to our life. And so I'm very grateful for that. Thank you very much. I hope all you guys who are there enjoy this talk as I did. And we'll see you all next Tuesday. That will be, and the next seminar is going to be in Spanish. And I hope you will be here with us. Aaron, there's any last sentence that you want to add?
No, I just want to thank you for having me. I enjoyed this. I enjoy this a lot. I enjoy answering the questions to the extent that I can. So thanks everyone for coming, and thanks for asking your questions. I hope they were helpful. and I hope you enjoy this series.
Very helpful. Well, thank you very much to everyone, and see you soon. Aaron, you too.
Thank you, Aaron.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Maria. Bye.
Yep.